When I turned 38, I thought I finally had balance, a steady income from freelance coding projects, a quiet home I'd bought on my own, and enough savings to give my daughter, Lena, the stability I never had. My parents, Evelyn and Hank, lived just across town, and even though they'd always been critical of my work-from-home nonsense, I still helped them whenever I could. My younger brother Caleb was the opposite, charming, reckless, and constantly broke. He called himself an entrepreneur, but every 6 months he had a new big idea that went nowhere. Still, our parents adored him. They said he had vision. What he really had was debt. When his latest startup collapsed, Mom called me crying, saying Caleb's truck had been repossessed. "He's just had bad luck," she said. "If you could lend him a little to get back on his feet." I wanted to say no. Every time I helped, it ended the same way. Caleb promised to pay me back, then disappeared until he needed something else. But guilt is a strange thing. I transferred $3,000 that night. 2 weeks later, he posted a photo of himself at a rooftop bar, bottle service and all, captioned, "Grind never stops." I stared at the screen, stomach tight, realizing I'd just funded another lie. When I confronted him, he laughed. "Relax, Riley," he said. "It's marketing. You gotta look successful to attract investors." My mother defended him like always. "You're too hard on your brother. He just needs support." My father stayed quiet, he always did, but the disappointment in his silence hurt more than any words. I told them I was done helping, that Caleb needed to grow up. Mom's voice turned sharp. "You're selfish, Riley. You only think about yourself." That word, selfish, followed me home like a curse. I didn't sleep that night. I kept replaying every moment I'd paid their bills, covered Caleb's rent, bought groceries when their pantry was empty, all while they treated my effort like obligation. I told myself it was the last time. But family guilt has a way of rewriting your boundaries until you barely recognize yourself. The next morning, Caleb showed up at my door holding coffee and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Don't be mad," he said. "I've got a business idea that'll make us both rich." That was the day I should have slammed the door. Instead, I let him in, and that single decision would cost me everything I'd built. Caleb sat at my kitchen table like he owned the place, spreading out crumpled papers, mock-ups, and a coffee-stained business plan. His new $1 million idea, he said, was a mobile app that connected small artists to local buyers, something he called Art Loop. He spoke fast, confident, using all the right words he'd probably memorized from a startup podcast. "You're great with tech, Riley. You could build the prototype," he said, smiling like this was already done. "I just need a little startup capital. 10,000, maybe 15 tops. We'll split everything 50-50. I wanted to laugh. 15,000? That was more than I had after paying off the mortgage and saving for Lena's school tuition. "I can't," I told him. "I'm finally stable, Caleb. I'm not risking that." He looked wounded, like I'd betrayed him. "You don't believe in me," he said quietly. "You never have." That one sentence hit harder than I wanted to admit. I'd spent my whole life being the responsible one, and somehow it always made me the villain. I told him I'd think about it, but before I even made a decision, my mother called. "He told me about your talk," she said, voice dripping with disappointment. "He's trying, Riley. Don't crush him like you always do." There it was again, the guilt. The same script they'd used my entire life. Against my better judgment, I gave in. I didn't give him 15,000, but I loaned him 10. "This is it," I warned. "No more after this." He hugged me like he'd already forgotten the promise. For the next few months, I helped him build the prototype after work, late nights coding while Lena did her homework beside me. Caleb barely showed up, but he always had excuses, meeting investors, networking events, long drives to secure funding. Then one morning, I got an email from my bank. A withdrawal I didn't recognize, $5,000 gone from the joint business account I'd set up for ArtLoop. My stomach dropped. I called Caleb. No answer. I called again. Nothing. By the third try, his phone went straight to voicemail. That night, Mom texted me a photo of Caleb at a casino in Santa Fe, glass of champagne in hand, smiling like life couldn't touch him. I stared at it until my hands shook. I'd been a fool. The next day, I filed a police report for theft, but the officer just shook his head. If your name's on the account, there's not much we can do. It's technically shared funds. I drove straight to my parents' house, furious. When Mom saw me, she didn't even look surprised. You didn't have to humiliate your brother, she said. He's family. He stole from me. I shouted. No, she said coldly, you abandoned him. That night, I realized I hadn't just lost my money, I'd lost my family. But what I didn't know was that Caleb's betrayal had only just begun. Weeks passed in silence. Caleb stopped answering my calls completely, and Mom's messages grew colder, shorter, like she was rationing affection. I threw myself into work, finishing freelance contracts and trying to rebuild what he'd taken. Lena could tell something was wrong. Are we okay, Mom? She asked one night, her small voice cutting through my thoughts. We will be, I said, forcing a smile I didn't feel. I didn't tell her about the nights I stared at my bank app, watching numbers shrink, or how I'd started skipping meals just to stretch what was left. But the real hit came a month later when I got a letter from my mortgage lender. Final notice, foreclosure review pending. I called immediately, panicked. The woman on the phone explained that my automatic payments had been stopped. Someone had logged into my account and changed the withdrawal settings. I froze. There was only one person who had ever known my login details. I'd given them to Caleb last year when he helped me set up online banking after a website redesign. I hung up and drove straight to my parents' house, trembling with rage. Caleb's truck was in the driveway. He opened the door like nothing had happened. Riley, he said casually, you shouldn't come here uninvited. You stole from me again, I said, holding up the letter. You messed with my bank account. He smirked. Relax. I just redirected a payment to cover what I owed someone. It's temporary. My mother appeared behind him, arms folded. We already talked to him, she said sharply. He's fixing it. You don't have to make a scene. I stared at both of them, disbelief burning in my chest. You're defending him again? He's family, she snapped. And you're always making him feel small. I turned to my father, hoping for something, anything, but he just looked away. I left before I said something I couldn't take back. 2 weeks later, I came home to find a moving truck parked in front of my house. Strangers were carrying boxes out. My chest locked up. What's going on? I demanded. The driver looked confused. Order came from the bank, he said. Property's been repossessed. I ran inside. Half my furniture was gone, drawers emptied. My stomach turned when I found Caleb's handwriting on a note taped to the fridge. It's just business, Riley. I'll pay you back. My vision blurred with fury. My neighbors watched from their porches as I screamed into the empty air, every ounce of betrayal crashing down at once. That night, I slept in my car, Lena curled against me, whispering, Mom, we can go somewhere else, right? I nodded even though I didn't know where somewhere else was. For the first time in my life, I understood what it meant to be truly alone, not because I had no one, but because the people I trusted most had turned me into a stranger in my own life. The next morning, I made a decision, I was done playing the victim. And if my family wanted war, they were about to get one. I woke up stiff in the driver's seat of my car, my neck aching, Lena still asleep beside me under a blanket. The sunrise bled orange across the windshield, and for a second, I almost convinced myself it was a fresh start. But then I looked at my empty house, and the illusion shattered. My phone buzzed with a new message from Caleb. You're making this harder than it has to be. Once I sell the property, I'll square things up. Sell the property? My breath caught. He had no legal claim to my house, but I realized he didn't need one. He had my personal info, forged emails, and, God help me, my signature from shared paperwork. I drove to the nearest cafe with free Wi-Fi and called the bank again, explaining everything. The representative's tone shifted immediately when she pulled up my file. Ms. Monroe, there was a deed transfer processed 2 weeks ago with your electronic signature on it. That's impossible, I said, voice shaking. I never signed anything. I'm sorry, but the documents were notarized electronically and verified through your registered email. My mind went blank. He'd stolen my home with a few clicks. I spent hours filing fraud reports, closing accounts, changing passwords, anything to lock him out. By evening, Lena was hungry, exhausted, asking if we could just go home. I wanted to cry. Instead, I took her to a cheap motel off the highway. As I checked in, the clerk gave me a sympathetic look I didn't deserve. Rough day? She asked. You could say that, I muttered. Inside the room, while Lena watched cartoons on my laptop, I opened my inbox, and that's when I saw it. An email from an unknown sender titled Proof, Don't Trust Them. My heart skipped. Attached were 2 PDF files. One was a scanned copy of the deed transfer showing Caleb's signature as buyer and mine as seller. The other was a legal retainer between Caleb and my parents, signed and dated before the house transfer. My chest tightened. They were in on it. All 3 of them. For a long time, I just stared at the screen, shaking. Every conversation, every guilt trip, every we just want to help Caleb, it all clicked into place. They hadn't been protecting him, they'd been protecting themselves. I remembered the time Mom insisted on helping me with the mortgage paperwork years ago, saying it was too much responsibility for me to handle alone. She'd probably given Caleb access long before I even suspected it. I was the fool who trusted them. But not anymore. I backed up every file, printed copies at a 24-hour store, and made a new folder on my laptop called Monroe Fraud Case. As I tucked Lena into bed that night, she looked up at me and said softly, Mom, are we gonna be okay? I kissed her forehead. We're gonna be better than okay, I said. We're gonna make sure they never hurt us again. The next morning, I walked into a lawyer's office with a folder full of evidence, and a fire I didn't know I still had. But what I didn't realize was that exposing them would come with a price I wasn't ready to pay. The lawyer's office was tucked between a payday loan center and an insurance agency, hardly glamorous, but I didn't care. I just needed someone who would listen. The brass plaque on the door read Thomas Grayson, attorney at law. Inside, the air smelled like burnt coffee and dust, but when Grayson looked up from his desk, his eyes were sharp, focused. You said you're dealing with fraud? He asked as I handed him the folder. I sat down, explaining everything in one breath, the stolen funds, the forged transfer, the fake signatures. He listened without interrupting, flipping through the documents with methodical precision. You're sure your signature was forged? Positive, I said. And I have proof. My parents and brother planned it together. He exhaled, leaning back in his chair. It's a strong case. But this won't be simple. They're family, and family fraud tends to get messy fast. He was right. Over the next week, I gathered bank statements, old texts, anything that showed a pattern. I discovered messages between my mom and Caleb where she said things like make sure Riley doesn't check her account for a few days and Dad can sign the witness form if needed. Every screenshot was a stab in the chest, proof that the people who raised me had planned my downfall. Lena stayed quiet during those days, watching me from the motel desk as I printed evidence like my life depended on it. It did. I sold my car to cover legal fees and took contract work at night just to keep us fed. Sleep became a luxury. 2 weeks later, Grayson filed the lawsuit, Monroe versus Monroe et al. The irony wasn't lost on me. My name stood against my bloodline in black ink. Within days, Mom called, her voice tight with fury. "How dare you do this to us?" She snapped. "After everything we've done for you? You mean stealing my house?" I said. "You did that for me? You're tearing this family apart," she hissed. "You don't take your own kin to court." I almost laughed at the absurdity. "You stopped being my family when you turned me into a payday." I hung up before she could respond. That night, Grayson called. "They've hired a defense attorney," he said. "And there's more. Someone's been trying to access your case file through our system." My heart stopped. "Who?" "We're not sure yet, but it's someone using a company IP from Albuquerque Real Estate Holdings." I recognized the name instantly. That was the firm Caleb bragged about partnering with months ago, the one he said was backing his projects. I stared out the motel window, the neon vacancy sign flickering red across the glass. They weren't just fighting back, they were connected to people who knew how to make things disappear. And if they couldn't destroy my evidence, they'd come after me instead. 2 nights later, someone proved me right. Because when I returned to the motel after work, the door to our room was open, and every piece of evidence I'd collected was gone. The door hung crooked on its hinges, lock splintered clean through. The moment I stepped inside the motel room, my stomach dropped. Papers littered the floor, drawers yanked open, laptop gone, printer cables dangling. Lena's backpack was tossed onto the bed, unzipped, her sketchbook scattered like someone had rifled through even her drawings. "Mom?" She whispered from behind me, her small voice trembling. "Stay by the car," I said, forcing calm I didn't feel. She hesitated but obeyed, clutching her stuffed rabbit as she backed out into the hallway. I dialed 911 with shaking fingers. "Someone broke into my room," I told the operator. "Everything's been stolen, files, hard drives, even my kids' things." The dispatcher promised to send someone, but by the time a cruiser pulled up 20 minutes later, the damage was already done. The officer who took the report couldn't have been more than 30. He looked around the wreckage inside. "No cameras on this side of the building," he said, jotting notes on a pad. "Who'd want your stuff?" "People I'm suing for fraud," I answered. His eyebrows lifted slightly. "Family?" "Unfortunately." He gave a low whistle. "That gets messy. Any idea who might have done it?" "Yeah," I said quietly. "All of them." After he left, I sat on the edge of the stripped bed, head in my hands. Everything, months of proof, bank statements, contracts, gone. The one thing they hadn't taken was the flash drive I'd kept hidden in my wallet, the only copy of the forged deed and Caleb's retainer. But it wasn't enough to win in court. Without the digital trail, the case was dead in the water. Grayson confirmed it the next morning when I met him outside his office. "Without the rest of the evidence, the defense will claim you fabricated everything," he said. "We can still file for a restraining order and request a court injunction, but criminal charges will be hard to sustain." I felt the fight drain out of me. "So, they get away with it?" He looked sympathetic. "For now." That night, I packed what little we had left and drove Lena to a friend's place across town. "You can't stay here forever," my friend, Tessa, warned. "They know where you are." She was right. I couldn't keep running, but I couldn't stop either. I needed a way to hit back that didn't rely on what they could destroy. I spent the next few days combing through every online document Caleb had ever posted, his old crowdfunding campaigns, business websites, LinkedIn updates. Buried in a cached version of a deleted page, I found something, a financial disclosure form with both his and my mother's signatures, linked to the same real estate firm that had tried to hack my lawyer's files. It listed multiple properties under shell company names, all tied to fraudulent tax IDs. I printed everything and sent anonymous copies to the Albuquerque Financial Crimes Division. No return address, no explanation, just the paper trail they needed to start digging. I didn't expect to hear back. But 3 days later, my phone rang. "Ms. Monroe?" A clipped voice asked. "This is Investigator Cruz with Financial Crimes. We'd like to talk about your submission. It appears your family's company is under federal review." For the first time in months, I felt something close to relief, until I pulled into Tessa's driveway that night and saw a black SUV idling by the curb, its headlights off, waiting. The SUV didn't move when I parked across the street. Its tinted windows reflected nothing but the dim streetlights, making it impossible to see inside. My pulse quickened as I killed my engine. Every instinct screamed that it wasn't random. I called Tessa from my cell, my voice low. "Is anyone visiting you tonight?" She hesitated. "No, why?" "Because there's a black car outside. Don't open your door for anyone." I hung up and sat there, watching. The longer I stared, the more I noticed the faint glow of a phone screen behind the glass, a figure shifting in the driver's seat. Whoever they weren't there by accident. I grabbed my pepper spray from the glove compartment, got out, and approached slowly, phone recording in hand. "Can I help you?" I called out, keeping my voice steady. The window rolled down halfway. A man in his 40s, clean-cut, no expression. "You're Riley Monroe?" he asked. "Who's asking?" I shot back. He held up a small black folder and flashed an ID. "Special Agent Cruz, Financial Crimes Division." I froze. The same name from the call earlier. "You sent us documents," he said evenly. "I'd like to discuss them in person. You've uncovered more than you realize." Inside Tessa's living room, Cruz spread out the printed pages I'd submitted. "You were right," he said. "The company your brother was working with, Silver Line Development, isn't legitimate. It's a front tied to a network that's been laundering money through fake property transfers. Your family's involvement wasn't minor. They were listed as participants in 6 separate shell accounts." My stomach turned. "So they're under investigation?" "They are now," Cruz said. "But I need to warn you, this goes beyond family fraud. Your brother's partners are dangerous people. If they think you're cooperating, they might retaliate." The warning came too late. Because while we were still talking, my phone lit up with a message from an unknown number. "We know what you did. Stop talking or you'll regret it." Cruz glanced at the screen, his jaw tightening. "They're watching you," he said. "We can get you protective custody if it comes to that." "No," I said immediately. "I'm not running anymore." He studied me for a moment, then nodded. "Then you'll need to stay quiet. Let us build the case." Over the next few days, Cruz's team began collecting digital evidence from the bank servers, tracking the fake accounts Caleb and my parents had helped funnel money into. I didn't hear from my family, but their silence said enough. The investigation was closing in. Still, at night, I couldn't shake the feeling that eyes followed me everywhere, cars slowing as I walked, calls that disconnected when I answered, shadows that lingered longer than they should. I started sleeping with the lights on. One night, Lena woke up from a nightmare and crawled into bed beside me. "Mom," she whispered, "I saw someone outside my window." My blood went cold. I grabbed the flashlight, heart pounding, and pulled the curtains back. Across the street, the black SUV was there again, engine running this time, headlights off. I ran outside, but by the time I reached the curb, it was gone. Just taillights disappearing into the dark. That was the night I decided to stop waiting for someone else to save me. I wasn't just going to expose them, I was going to make sure they could never hurt us again. And the next morning, I started by sending a message directly to my brother, "Meet me tomorrow noon. Dad's old workshop. Come alone." The old workshop sat on the edge of the desert highway, a rusted tin building that had once smelled of sawdust and oil when my father worked there. Now it just reeked of dust and memory. I parked my car at exactly noon, the sun hanging high and harsh. Lena was safe with Tessa. I'd made sure of that before coming. My phone buzzed, one text from Caleb, on my way. "You'd better have something worth my time." I almost laughed at the arrogance. Even now, after everything, he thought he was the one in control. When he arrived, he didn't even look nervous. Same cocky grin, same expensive jacket that screamed money he hadn't earned. "So," he said, stepping inside, "this is where we're doing family therapy now?" "Drop the act, Caleb," I said, my voice steady. "You know why we're here." He smirked. "Because you're obsessed with destroying me? Because you can't stand that I finally made something of myself?" "You didn't make anything," I snapped. "You stole it. You stole my home, my money, my peace, and you dragged Mom and Dad into it too." He shrugged. "They wanted a better life. You were just collateral." I pulled out the small recorder Agent Cruz had given me the night before, hidden in my jacket pocket. "You've been working with Silver Line Development," I said. "You know they're under federal investigation, right?" For the first time, a flicker of fear crossed his face. "What are you talking about?" "Don't play dumb," I said, stepping closer. "They've traced the accounts. The fake deeds. The shell companies. It's over, Caleb." He tried to recover, forcing a smirk. "You think they'll believe you over me? I've got connections. You've got a sob story." "No," I said quietly. "I've got proof." His expression hardened. "You turned on your own family? You stopped being my family the moment you betrayed me." His eyes darted to the door. "You shouldn't have done that," he said softly. "You don't know who you're dealing with." And then, before I could react, he lunged, grabbing my arm, trying to snatch the recorder. We struggled, crashing into an old workbench, sending tools scattering across the floor. "Let go!" I shouted. "You think you can ruin me?" He yelled, his voice raw. "You think you're better than me?" In the chaos, his elbow hit a shelf, knocking down a rusted metal box. It burst open, scattering old documents, my father's handwritten notes and ledgers from years ago. I froze mid-struggle when I saw them. Pages listing property transfers, account numbers, the originals. My father had kept records of everything. Caleb followed my gaze, realization flashing in his eyes. "No," he whispered. I shoved him off and grabbed the papers, my heart racing. "It's over," I said. He laughed bitterly. "You don't get it. Even if you turn this in, they'll come for you too. Lang's people don't leave loose ends." "Then let them come," I said. "I've got nothing left to lose." The distant sound of engines broke the silence. Tires on gravel. Caleb turned pale. "You called them," he hissed. "You set me up." "No," I said, stepping back as flashing red and blue lights flooded through the broken window. "You set yourself up." The doors burst open. Agents swarmed in. Caleb Monroe, one of them shouted, "You're under arrest for fraud, forgery, and conspiracy." He backed up, hands raised, eyes wild. "Riley, please," he said, desperate now. "Don't let them take me." I met his gaze, but there was nothing left to save. "You already did this to yourself." As they cuffed him and led him outside, the desert wind howled through the open doorway, scattering dust and old papers like ghosts of everything we'd lost. I stepped into the light, the recorder still warm in my pocket, my father's documents clutched in my hand. But as I watched the agents drive Caleb away, I noticed another car parked at the ridge, silver, sleek, and familiar. And when the driver stepped out, my blood ran cold. It wasn't Caleb they were after next, it was me. The silver car gleamed under the sun, engine still running. My breath caught as I recognized the woman stepping out, my mother, Evelyn. Perfectly dressed, perfectly calm, as if she hadn't just watched her son get arrested. "You did this," she said, voice smooth and sharp. You destroyed your brother. He destroyed himself, I replied, gripping the folder tighter. You helped him do it. Her eyes narrowed. You think you're innocent? You've humiliated this family, dragged our name through the dirt. Do you even understand what you've done? I laughed bitterly. Yeah. I stopped being your scapegoat. She took a step closer, the wind tugging at her hair. You could have walked away, Riley. We could have fixed this quietly. Like you fixed Dad's accounts? Like you fixed my house deed? For the first time, she faltered, the mask slipping. Your father was a fool, she said softly. He wouldn't listen. We were drowning, and Caleb found a way out. I did what I had to do. You did what was easy, I said, voice trembling. And you sold out your own daughter to do it. Sirens still echoed faintly in the distance as agents packed up evidence behind me. Evelyn's gaze flicked to the folder in my hand. If you give them that, it's not just Caleb who goes down. I will too. Think about what you're doing. I have, I said. For years. She smiled sadly, like she pitied me. You'll regret this. Family is all you'll ever have. I met her eyes. Then I guess I don't have any. I turned and walked toward Agent Cruz's car, my knees weak but my steps steady. He met me halfway, holding out a hand. You okay? Not really, I said. But I will be. He nodded, taking the folder. This is enough to close it all. They'll face full charges. I looked back one last time. My mother stood by her car, watching in silence. No tears. No remorse. Just quiet fury. For the first time, it didn't break me, it freed me. A month later, it was over. Caleb was sentenced to 10 years for fraud and conspiracy. My mother took a plea deal and disappeared somewhere out of state. My father's name was cleared posthumously after Cruz's team verified his records. The company was liquidated, debts paid, and for once, there was nothing left for anyone to steal. I bought a small townhouse in Santa Fe with what remained of my savings. It wasn't much, but it was mine. Lena helped me paint the walls bright yellow, saying it made the place look happy. Some nights, when the house gets quiet, I still hear my father's voice in my head, steady and kind. Protect what matters, Riley. I used to think that meant money or property. Now I know it means peace. I stopped chasing approval from people who never wanted me to win. I built something new, with truth, not guilt. The past didn't disappear, but it finally stopped owning me. And as the sun set behind the desert hills that first night in our new home, Lena curled up beside me and whispered, "We're safe now, right?" I smiled and kissed her forehead. "Yeah," I said softly. "We're finally free." Because sometimes family isn't the people you're born to, it's the life you rebuild after they're gone.